Hello, I'm the Flawless Walrus, and welcome back to another Death Battle prediction video. But first, I'm actually not going to be covering Bowser vs. Eggman because I did actually have a reaction to it. So if you want my thoughts on the episode, you can check it out there. All I will say is that, having given it time to settle, I can actually say that I think Bowser vs. Eggman might even be my new favorite episode. It was just really fucking good, with a lot of great details interspersed throughout. Just every time I watched it, I saw something new, and just, episode was everything it could have been. It was great. But that brings us to Among Us versus Fall Guys. Now, some might think that this is just a really low power fight to come off of the tails of the last three fights that we've had, where they've all been pretty high power. You might be wrong with that one, because this fight actually gets buck wild. Now, there's two different ways that you can look at this fight, and from the previews, it is looking like they are incorporating crossovers. You can do either crossovers or without. And ultimately, I don't think the result is too different between which one you do. It more or less has there be either no win cons for the loser, if it is no crossovers, or there are a couple win cons for the loser. So to first break it down, let's go with the no crossovers. There are a couple feats on Fall Guys' side that are considered kind of controversial in regards to, there's a constellation feat where the Fall Guy essentially lights up a constellation. Some people say that doesn't apply to AP, but their power seems to be actually, causing the constellation to appear and, brighten up and lighten the spaces between. So I think you could make the argument that it does actually scale to the power of the Fall Guys themselves. Next, we have the durability feat, that is the black hole that they can fall into. Some people say, oh, it's a small black hole, which, yeah, it is. But the size of the black hole and surviving it would essentially be still star level in durability. Now, here's the thing. Some people have pointed out that we don't know if they survived. But we actually do know that, because the creators of Fall Guys have even said that nothing that's currently in the game has actually killed a Fall Guy yet. And that they can't really die. And that every time that you play the game, you are consistently playing with one Fall Guy. So, throughout your whole Fall Guys career, it's just you and the one bean. So, it basically means that anything in the game that seems like it could have killed them, doesn't. They scale to basically everything in their setting. And then, I think down from that, so you have those two feats that are kind of on a cosmic scale. And then you go down next, and it's essentially just complete destruction of these gigantic walls. If I remember correctly, it got somewhere around 60 kilotons of TNT, which is about town level. Conversely, speed-wise, there is a feat where, with the Boba Fett jetpack, they managed to dodge lasers. And the feat came out to about 0.33 C. So 33% the speed of light. And then for the Among Us side, the highest ends for some of the things like the scaled, the ship exploding, that came out to about, at its highest end, about 2 kilotons. Which means that there is approximately a 30 times power gap, which I think at that point you do get to the point where it's just not possible to do any damage. And the imposter doesn't really have the means of actually destroying enough of the Fall Guy for it to matter. Because the Fall Guy is capable of, ironically enough, when using the crewmate costume, there's a chance that you're a dead crewmate, so the half the body with the giant bone sticking out. So the Fall Guy is capable of actually functioning without the top half of its body. So that kind of capability to just keep going despite being so badly injured is not really something that the imposter has any real means to get past. Not using any crossovers, that kind of puts them both on a lot more straightforward of what their abilities are, and it makes it so that the imposter doesn't really just have any means to get past that kind of durability gap. It puts them into more of a state of being a brick, and even like the guardian angel or any of the ghosts, the imposter is going to still be able to be killed as a ghost. That's kind of the kicker there, is that in Fall Guys, with things like the Pac-Man costume, he can kill ghosts, and he can physically interact with ghosts with the Jack Skellington one, where he touches like the intangible dog that Jack Skellington has in Nightmare Before Christmas. So there are means. The costumes do a lot more in Fall Guys as opposed to Among Us, to the point where you actually do have a lot of abilities that you get from them, like He-Man's sword, Venom symbiote, which actually does give like black webs and like a lot of abilities that Spider-Man characters would have. There's ones for the Fantastic Four, or not the Fantastic Four, the Incredibles, where there's like the barrier generation, super speed. I don't remember if the elastic one, Frozone one gives ice. So we kind of have a situation where one of the characters with no crossovers just kind of becomes a bit of a brick who can do things like hacking technology, but there's not really too much that they're going to be able to pick with here, because other than just the tablet that makes levels, not really any real means of getting past all of the craziness. In terms of speed, there are some things that can get FTL for the imposter, but with that kind of power gap, it won't matter. The FTL thing is a little bit questionable too, just because it does involve shooting meteors that are like way ahead of the ship. So it is kind of one of those situations where it's questionable how much that would actually scale to the reactions and capabilities of the characters themselves. But we'll give it to them for the benefit of the doubt, because even if they do have a speed advantage, it does not necessarily mean that they can kill them. So I think the Fall Guy soundly takes no crossovers. And then we come to the crossovers, and holy shit, it gets worse. So biggest thing that we're looking at here is on Among Us' side is essentially just vampire survivors. There's not really too much else that's worth talking about. There's a couple things here and there, but like anything that really gives abilities or anything. So vampire survivors does give a lot of stuff. It gives universal scaling. It gives a shitload of items and weapons and things like that, going from soul fuckery to mind fuckery, existence erasure, things like that. So there's a lot of good weapons there, and the existence erasure in particular is actually a win con that I don't think the Bean has any particular answer to. But we come down to the situation that the scaling for the Fall Guys side is absolutely fucking bonkers. First and foremost is, as we've actually seen in the episode already, which I'm floored that they showed it this early, is the Fortnite scaling, and basically stating that the Bean was at the center of the Big Bang. Okay, sure. That means that I imagine that they are going to bring in vampire survivors to make an equal uni argument for both of them, but it doesn't stop there. There's also Bomberman scaling, which has some kind of universal to like low multi with some possible like immeasurable stuff with like space-time and shit. And then for me, the big one, I'm very happy to say that we've already seen it brought up, albeit it was only used to confirm the weird bird skeleton, but Final Fantasy XIV, baby. Essentially, there is a feat that the Beans scale to during their crossover with FF14, because when you do the event, you get the Beans as a minion. Now, what minions do in FF14 is they just follow you around, make funny noises, and stand on your shoulder if they're like a bird or something, and they're just there. They chill, they have fun. Just sitting in their lane. But there is a game mode called Lord of Verminion, and what that does is it makes it so that you can have your minions fight each other. So this means that the Bean minion is capable of fighting all sorts of other minions from Final Fantasy XIV. Now you might just think, hey, I looked at a list of them and one of them is just this random cat or like a tiny little robot version of a character. It doesn't have any feats or anything. But so there's like 530 of these minions, and some of them have some pretty nuts feats. The biggest one of note in this case is the Starboard minion, which is a Medion unit. Now, for people who don't play FF14, what a Medion unit is basically a very depressed bird. And this bird girl essentially caused the apocalypse by essentially taking all of the emotions into herself, because she's an entelechy, which, like, basically, I don't want to go into the whole thing, but at the end of Endwalker, she actually releases all of this energy that she had to restore life to the universe. Now you might think to yourself, okay, that's a universal feat. Alas, it is not. It is very not. The universe size for FF14 is fucking massive. There was a Omega, if anyone's familiar with Final Fantasy common characters. So Omega flew in a straight line through the universe at a very high speed, fast enough to pass several stars in a few seconds, and maintained this speed as its power-saving mode, because we only saw that quote after we knew that it was already on power-saving mode, so it was probably going faster before. So going in a straight line, we know the speed, at the very least, and then we have a bunch of asterisks representing the days, essentially. So there was a log made each day, and so we know that it was, I can't remember the exact number of days, but the speed feat ends up being like really massive for her to get this quadrillions of times the size of our own universe. And when she restores life to the universe, she spreads it over, I think about 7 or so seconds, and it comes out to about like a few nonillions. There's a word you don't hear very often. So if we are going full in on the scaling with other series with crossovers, you have essentially FTL universe level Among Us versus nonillions, see quadrillions of times Uni Fall Guy. So at that point, even if there is the whole existence erasure win con, just not fast enough or strong enough to survive just one immediate punch from the Fall Guy. So yeah, I know I kind of went into the tangent about FF14 pretty hard there, but it's literally my favorite game, and once I saw that this fight got announced, I was just praying that with all that's going on, with Final Fantasy VII being the only one that ever gets acknowledged by Death Battle, we now have the first time that a Final Fantasy other than 7 has appeared in a Death Battle, and is Among Us versus fucking Fall Guys. It's funny how that works, but I will pop off and take whatever crumbs I can get. We've seen the animation with the preview. Seems very quaint so far, but it could easily get cosmic in a hurry. So my vote is ultimately that the Fall Guy takes it, regardless of whether you use just their own games, or if you use crossovers. I think both of them go in the direction of the Fall Guys. So with that, I know there's been a lot of people who basically make the argument of, but Among Us has a gun and knife, and Fall Guy just run around. But the Fall Guys could literally pick up the imposter and just rip them in half with zero effort, and the gun would just bounce off. Like, it ain't gonna do shit. So we will see for the next one. I will hopefully have a reaction of that one, so I'll see you then.